I'm Charlie Bright of Gold Derby, and today I'm speaking with Chris Williams, the director of the Oscar-nominated animated film The Sea Beast, which you can currently stream on Netflix. The first question I wanted to ask you is, how did you and the design team come up with the look for the Red Bluster?
Oh my gosh. Well, I am fortunate to work with incredibly talented artists, and we spent a lot of time, looking at sketches. And we actually met with someone who was familiar with large marine mammals, and we talked to that person for a little bit as far as getting and got some guidance from them. And then Shiyun Kim, who's our primary creature designer, he just kind of he had an idea and it kept evolving. And he's someone who works in kind of mysterious ways, where he works at strange hours. Sometimes he'll be arriving at work just when I'm leaving. And sometimes you'll come in the morning, and he'll have spent all night sort of looking at things that you wouldn't expect. Like I remember one time he told me he'd spent an evening looking at chairs, designs of chairs, and it's just to sort of get some inspiration as far as the shape language and everything. And he presented a version of the Red Bluster that suddenly we all lit up to. And then we worked with a modeler who built it in 3D, and we were all excited about that. And the rest is history.
So, where did the idea for this film first come from? I noticed it was an original idea. Where did it come from?
Well, it came from the movies that I loved the most growing up. When I was a kid, I loved the big action adventure genre stories. So my favorite movie as a kid was King Kong, and Raiders of the Lost Ark was a big lightning bolt moment for me as well. And of course, Star Wars, those kind of big, broad adventure stories, and especially stories where characters leave their world, the known world, and venture off into the unknown. I love those kind of films. And I'd been working at Disney Animation for about 25 years, and I had a great experience there. I worked on movies that I'm really proud of, but I started wondering if it was possible, with a North American feature animated film, to tell a story that would tonally evoke those films I loved so much growing up, a real pure, broad action adventure story. And so that was the impetus for it. And I've always loved those old maps, those unfinished maps where the map makers would populate the oceans with the really, really fantastic, really fanciful illustrations of sea monsters. And I always thought that'd be a really cool world for an animated movie. And so that was kind of ruminating, and I put the two things together, and I imagine that if you really did inhabit a world of sea monsters, it would probably give rise to the vocation of sea monster hunter. And that was really where the story began.
One of the other really interesting aspects to this story is that sort of becomes more prominent towards the end of the movie is the idea of how the way that history is taught can frame how we act in the present.
Mm.
And I was wondering, was that idea always a part of how you wanted to tell this story, or was that something that that you thought of to incorporate a bit later on in it?
That's a great question. Because of course, when you embark to put a story together, you're thinking in terms of plot and character, but you're also thinking about the thematic, right? And I think it's okay for a movie to be about more than one thing, as long as you know primarily what you're trying to say. And when people come onto the show, I talked about the fact that I wanted to really examine this idea of a cycle of aggression and a cycle of violence, and how it can perpetuate itself, and how difficult it can be to break away from it. And but over the years of developing the story, we went deeper into it, and we started examining the reasons why the cycles can begin. You know, how do we get into this mess? And we said that specifically, that there are times where there are powerful interests that will create narratives that can pit us against each other, pit us against ourselves, for their own gain. And that really felt more specific, more potent, and that really became what the movie was building towards, that idea. And of course, when you make these movies, they have to be primarily a piece of entertainment. You know, they have to engage the audience in some way and make people want to watch it. But you want to also have some meat on the bone. You want to tell stories that have some substantive thematic ideas, and of course, we're telling a story that takes place in this fantasy world that feels like a period piece, but at the same time, it has to speak in thematic terms to a contemporary audience. And we are very much living in the world that we're in as we develop these movies over the course of years. And so I was influenced by the events around me, things I was seeing in the world today, and things that I wanted to focus on and bring to light. And so that's where that all came from.
I can tell you, as someone who lives in Virginia, I can tell you that that is something that's always very present on the mind, and that very much spoke to me. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I see where you're going on this.
Right. Yes.
um, uh, you have a wonderful voice cast in this movie, but I think one of the great discoveries here is, I believe you pronounce it Zaris Angel Hator. Is that
Zaris Angel Hater, but it took me a while.
Okay, Hater. I didn't want to assume that it was Hater.
Yeah.
But yeah. For with her performance as Maisie, how did you end up casting her in this movie?
Well, she was actually the last person that we cast. We were incredibly blessed with our cast to get Carl Urban and Jared Harris and Marianne Jean Baptiste to play our lead characters. And but then when it came time to cast Maisie, we didn't want to cast an adult pretending to be younger. We wanted to find an actual a younger person. But obviously someone, if you've seen the movie, there are moments in the movie that are really demanding from an acting standpoint. And so we needed to find someone who genuinely was young but could pull it off. And so we cast a wide net. We put out a call all through the UK, looking for younger actors, and we listened to lots of auditions. And I have to say, when we heard Zaris Angel's recording right away, we were struck by it. But we did our due diligence, and we went through and we'll do this thing where we create these nonsense conversations where we will just take excerpts of dialogue and put it to images in editorial, where you'll see the Jacob, the Carl Urban character set against the Maisie character, and just try to feel, is there chemistry there? And there very much was. And ultimately, at the end of the day, the process reinforced our initial instinct that Zaris Angel was right for the part. And I have to say, working with her was one of the real bright spots of the experience. Obviously, making these animated films, it's pretty taxing. It's years and years of what feels like a marathon and a sprint at the same time. And it was during the pandemic. So actually, I only worked with the only actor I worked with in person was Jared Harris a couple times before we were shut down. And then from that point on, we were recording people who were in Toronto or in New Zealand or in London, or sometimes just in LA, but in their bedroom. Like it was a surreal way to make a film. But working with Zaris was incredible. And there was a moment where we were building up to the kind of the emotional peak of the film, where Zaris Angel's character confronts the monarchy and confronts the king and queen. And we were going to be asking a lot of Zaris Angel in that moment. We asked her to tap into something very deep. And we always give our actors lots of opportunity to try things and experiment and fail and try again. And you want to create a very encouraging atmosphere, especially if it's a younger, less experienced actor. So we imagined that we would probably be at it for a while. And so I described to her the scene and what the character was thinking. And then she went at it. And I have to say, she did that first take. I think her first take is the one that's in the film. And she delivered that line to the king, where she says, I have every right. And then she started crying. And then her mom was in the room, and her mom was emotional, and I got really emotional, and I could see all the little squares. Hi, what's your cat's name?
This is Princess Carolyn.
Hi, Princess Carolyn. My cats were always invading during the making of the movie, so I know how it feels. So I could see then all the little squares all on my Zoom call. Everybody was getting really emotional. And part of it was like we knew that we had a movie. That moment had to work for the film to work. And but also you could just see that Zaras had tapped into something very, very deep and very universal. So it's a case of that specific moment in the movie and that specific story and specific world, but we knew it was going to speak in a much more universal way to a broad audience, and it was going to ring true. And so that was a really, really powerful moment, and really showed me what she was capable of as an actor.
One of the other things I love about the voice cast is that you gave us a little mini Downton Abbey reunion with Jim Carter and Dan Stevens
Yes.
in their respective roles. Did that dawn on you when you had cast them both?
Yes, yes. We were so glad that those guys were willing to do it. They were smaller parts, but they were game for it.
It
And
was wonderful to hear Jim Carter do that kind of it's do something that was very, very different from Carson. It was very it was and
yeah,
he was so great in it.
yeah, and they were both kind of like they were both playing heels, but really enjoying it, you know. And they both, yeah, it was, both of them were just really fun to work with, really easygoing, no ego. There's that thing where sometimes, coming from a North American standpoint, when you're gonna get set to work with an English actor, a UK actor, it's sort of that accent is sort of vaguely enchanting and also intimidating, and they always sound and seem so smart. But I have to say, all of them were just really, really down to earth and really game and up for playing and experimenting, and I have to say they brought so much to the film.
So, as I mentioned, you got nominated this year for best animated feature. What was it like when you found out that you had gotten nominated this year?
Well, it was cool, I have to say. It never gets old. As I said, I worked at Disney for 25 years, and I left to make this story, and it was a very kind of a personal experience for me. And I did ask a lot of people to take a chance and join me on the journey, and it was a really ambitious film, as you know, and we were asking a lot of the crew, and I thought they did an incredible job, and it felt really good to see their work recognized. And yeah, I didn't want to. There's always this game you play, right, where everybody who works in these movies says, awards don't matter, and I think it's true that it's art is very subjective, and the audience's relationship with the movie or whatever it is theirs, and it shouldn't be affected by whether it wins awards or not. And at the same time, people work so hard on these things, and I know that it matters to the crew. And it is so great to see their work recognized, and I know it matters to my mom. It's what we do is can be intangible and hard to describe, and I don't think my mom entirely knows what I do for a living or understands entirely what I do for a living, but she understands this. And so it is validating. And I didn't want to jinx it, so I didn't get up to watch the presentation in the morning, and I got a text from Pam Ribbon, who was the writer of My Year of Dicks. And she texted to say, "I'll see you at the Oscars." And at that moment, I knew. And then I got a flood of congratulatory texts after that.
So, you did mention that that it never gets old. You are actually an Oscar winner. You won as part of the team for Big Hero 6 in I guess it was the 2014 Oscars. So the ceremony was 2015, but it was in but it was for the movies of 2014. What was it? What was that experience like with winning? And what was that night like for you?
Oh man, it's such a crazy whirlwind because you get absorbed into this apparatus that you don't really know much about. I think it was The Rock up on stage, and so the Rock escorts you off the stage, and suddenly and then the next person I saw was Jared Leto, and he was all excited back there celebrating, and we were taking pictures with him. And then you do a series of sort of mini little press events in this labyrinth that's behind the stage, and there's also little bars set up and just sort of tubs of beer, and it's kind of but you're just sort of led like a deer in the headlights from one thing to another, and you don't really know what's going on because you have no frame of reference for it. And then there's a moment where they sort of trot you out on another stage in front of a massive a group of press, and they're taking pictures, and they're suddenly sticking microphones in your face and asking all these questions that you weren't prepared for. And then you're and then suddenly you're whisked out of it and then back into your seat, and you don't even quite know what happened to you. And it's such a blur, you barely remember. And I honestly barely remember. I remember fragments of it. But it's fun. It's weird and fun. And the whole time I was very happy for, certainly my mom, my family, my wife. I knew she was excited, and my kids, but especially the crew, because I know that they worked so hard on these films, and they're so dedicated to what they do. They're so good at what they do, and they're applying their craft. This is how they express themselves, and this is what they've learned to do at a really high level, and they're applying it to this thing, and it's being recognized, and that gives me more gratification than anything else.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We wish you all the best over the next couple of weeks. And to all of our viewers, please make sure to like this video, smash that subscribe button, and don't forget to go to goldderby.com and make your Oscar predictions through March 12th. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you very much. It was fun.